Wrath of Angels. Chapter 2, Scene 3, Awakening. Amid the debris of shattered Caliban. Month 3, year 259, the 41st millennium. They tried 12 awakenings. Each ended in failure and death. The book of failures grew heavy. The pages turned like blades. And yet they kept trying, because to stop would be to admit the ship wanted to stay a tomb. First awakening. The Scald. Engines throbbed. One colossal beat, like a heart startled in sleep. And the coolant maze answered with a bright white sigh. The sigh became a storm. Valves screamed. Sight turned to steam. Skin sloughed from bone in sheets that slid down thigh and shin and pulled at boots with a slap like offal hitting a butcher's table. 50 men boiled where they stood, mouths open to drink air that wasn't there anymore. Along the deck plates, the heat drew oil from the seams, beads of black forming rosaries that rolled toward the drains, as if seeking absolution. One survived, crawling through a sluice that stank of copper and sacrament. His eyes blistered shut like wax, wrapped later in cloth, hands bandaged to mitts. He pressed his ear to a bulkhead as if to a fevered child and whispered, "Thirsty, aren't you?" A medici pulled him back. He bit the man's wrist without knowing he had teeth left. The book. First attempt. Thermal runaway. 50 appeased. Coolant rights revised. In the margin a hand not Hyrodex wrote. Breathed in, not out. Second awakening. The echo. At ignition cadence the vox chorus opened, and the dead came through as if signal were a gate left ajar. The boarding team lost long ago screamed in present tense. Not we died, but we die. Bolt counts rattled in bursts. Someone prayed their last prayer backward. The sound crawled under the nails. A child's sing-song voice joined, counting up 1, 2, 3, and refused to learn 10. The number hung just out of reach like a ledge over a pit. An adept clamped a wrench to his ear and twisted until cartilage gave with a soft pop. He held the cup of meat in a shaking hand and found the voices clearer. He jammed the flesh into the throat of a speaker grill. It sizzled and smoked, filling the compartment with a smell like breakfast turned wrong. The count went on unfussed. 7, 8, 9, 9, 9. The book. Second attempt. Echo of the dead. Channels purged. Choir replaced. A catechism bloomed below. Do not answer the dead. They remember better than you. Third awakening. The blue. Candles in empty chapels woke by themselves, each wick catching a blue that gave no heat and ate warmth from the room like hunger. Frost formed in the curls of ironwork and on the faces of saints. For an hour, breath smoked in hot mouths, while wax stood upright as if deciding. Then the blue burst. Wax became a metal rain. Drops punched holes through hymnals and stuck quivering in the oak of pews like arrows. A priest staggered out blinded, eyelids fused smooth, hands cooked to bone where he'd tried to shield his eyes. He laughed in hiccups. "I saw an ocean," he said, "but the ocean had a ceiling." Servitors swept the droplets into pans. Each bead ticked against tin with the exact rhythm of a heartbeat that isn't yours. The book. Third attempt. Blue fire. 1 blinded, 5 burned. Wax treated as alloy. Nota bene in neat Mechanicum hand. Alloy composition non-standard. Tastes of salt. Fourth awakening. The lullaby. It began as a hiss in the pipes, the harmless chatter of steam. Then tune accreted to noise the way barnacles find a hull. A lullaby grew from the hiss, sung in many children's voices, none belonging to anyone aboard. The melody moved like a hand smoothing hair. Men leaned back against bulkheads, as if given permission. They set tools down carefully, reverently, palms open, blades turned inward, the way one sets a child away from the edge of a table. By the penultimate bar, 3 men had hung themselves from gallery chains. A 4th failed. He wept without tears for the rest of the day, throat worked raw by a sob that refused to arrive. When silence returned, the pipes bled a sugar film. Ants nowhere aboard walked a line to it in a dream and died there in neat rows. The book, 4th attempt. Unauthorized hymn. 3 self-offered. Pipes bled sugar. In the gutter a small hand wrote, "We have no children." An underlined no until the paper tore. 5th awakening. The denial. 1,000 data slates woke at once and wrote no in exact unison, letter height calibrated like soldiers in a parade. The word leapt into eyes. Men blinked and found it etched on eyelids, on walls, on the fine enamel of their own teeth. Heat followed ink. Slates burst into flame without smoke, then made smoke anyway. Curlicues that braided themselves into wings. The wings beat once and unmade. A priest scraped his tongue along deckplate patterning until the rough took the taste buds away. He wrote no in the blood that followed and smiled like a man hearing good news. The mark dried mirror bright and reflected the ceiling of the ship as if water lay there above them, held by nothing. The book, 5th attempt. Denial manifested, slates destroyed, noise unrecorded. Survivor's note appended later by a different quill. It wasn't no, it was a name. The mouth refuses it. 6th awakening, the glass song. Chandeliers lit with frost light. Crystals chimed to one another like polite knives. Then they shattered without cutting anyone. Shards hung in the air, a hairbreadth too long, ringing, each note precise as a star's pulse. The choirmaster wrote on his palm in ink, transcribing pitches as they fell. The ink bled into his skin, black veins running from knuckle to wrist. He continued until the last high sliver chimed and dropped. A junior adept, lips blue with cold, whispered that the notes spelled a word. 5 more heard 5 more words and none matched. One knelt, wrote his word into the book's margin in a fine engineer's script. The letters sank through parchment, through desk, through deck, a vertical inscription descending like a needle through cloth. Weeks later, faint rust on a girder 30 decks down formed the same letters crookedly, as if written left-handed by a tired god. The book, 6th attempt. Frost looming, harm avoided. Auditory pattern unresolved. Mechanicum addendum, containment unnecessary. Handwritten human addendum below, containment impossible. 7th awakening. The name. The engines cleared their throat, and a man became punctuation in a sentence made of steel. He flew into a bulkhead at an angle that disagreed with the geometry of death, denting metal with a shoulder blade, and most of his history. He lived like a jar full of cracked glass, each breath a gentle rattle. He spoke only the ship's name, over and over, a word that undid itself as you looked at it. The medici flinched without knowing why. When he died, the sound left the compartment like a flock startled into dark. No one could recall the syllables a moment later. The Auspex log recorded 6 seconds of broadband hiss, exactly shaped like a gap between words. The book, 7th attempt, kinetic objection, 1 crushed yet living, language event non-retentive, margin, we are not permitted to know what we serve, 8th awakening, the pressure. Silence arrived not as absence, but as presence, a thickening where sound should have been. Men opened mouths and found nothing came or went. Lungs moved like fists punching water. Pressure deepened until vision whitened at the edges. The world narrowed to the fact of a heartbeat that might or might not belong to you. One serf's heart decided. It stopped. He slumped, smiling like a child in a cradle. Others stood with tears on faces they could not feel, bodies convinced they were drowning in a sea of compressions. When sound returned, clang of chain, cough of torch, someone swearing because he still could. Men laughed, ugly and grateful for the scrape of the world against itself. The book, 8th attempt, perfect silence. One heart stilled, no echo registered. A square of black ink appeared on the page by itself by morning and would not be scraped away. 9th awakening. The script. Paint blistered along corridor seams, bubbles fattening, then splitting to reveal lines like letters glimpsed in a dream, angles too sharp for the human mouth, curves too soft for the human hand. The marks crawled as if still being written by an invisible wrist. Adepts chased them with scalpels and cameras. The marks shifted to avoid focus. Some let the marks catch them instead. They pressed the blistered paint to their skin, tattoos by accident. The bodies that took the lines began to shed outward from the inscriptions, flakes of self lifting like old varnish. One man carved the shapes into his eyelids. He saw only fire until it ended. A servitor rolled through, wheels leaving blank tracks where the script refused to exist. Hours later, rust bloomed in those tracks, spelling a single character that bent the eye around it. The book, 9th attempt, transient script, semantic deviant, 7 succumbed by self-inscription. Margin. Instructions for leaving, maybe. None returned to confirm. 10th awakening. The answer. Chaplains chanted steady litanies and cadence. Their words came back to them half a beat late in their own voices, turned inside out. The answer mocked without laughing. It praised their effort while unmaking it. A deacon tore his tongue free to stop being told what he meant. Blood ran down the pages of the Lectio until the letters floated loose and sailed like red shrimp in a jar. Even tongueless, the echoes persisted in those voices, continuing the prayer in a better meter, lauding the new quiet. A novitiate fell to his knees, shaking, and put his head under a lectern as if shelter could be made by wood from whatever had learned his voice. The book, 10th attempt, countervox. Organs excised. Echo persisted. Mechanicum note. This is not feedback. This is criticism. 11th awakening. The sleep. A hum started low in the ship's bones. It moved into men as if their bones were a continuation of the hull. Palpebrae sagged like curtains let down. Hammers fell in slow motion against rivets that leapt forward to meet them. Work proceeded through sleep, dream becoming workplace. In the dream's corridors lined up obediently, and everyone knew where everything was. When the hum ended, names had gone missing. Men looked at their hands as if those would tell them who they were. They could recite every deck designation, storage nook, cable run, vent aperture. They could not say their mother's names. A scribe with beautiful penmanship wrote his lost name on his own forearm, so he would not forget it again. When he woke from a later nap, the ink had crawled down his wrist and written itself neatly in the book on the line where such names were never supposed to appear. Then the letters dried to powder and blew away. The book, 11th attempt, somnolent resonance, personal names erased, spatial memory enhanced. Addendum. Keepers appointed to hold names for one another. Keepers losing their keep. 12th awakening. The wire. The scream came thin through every channel, as if stretched over knife edges. A woman's voice that belonged to no one aboard and to all grief at once. Adepts collapsed with hands to ears like children betrayed by a mother. The sound would not die until each channel was cut by hand, even those that existed only on paper and in minds that remembered the plan. A man ran from panel to panel with a hatchet, severing conduits as if killing a many-headed thing. In the chapel, one adept scrawled, "Forgive me," in his own blood, and vanished between kneelers, as if the space beneath had learned to be a doorway. The letters remained wet for 3 days. They reflected the faces of passers-by not as they were, but as they would be in 10 years. Several turned away from themselves and walked into bulkheads. The book, 12th attempt, prolonged keen. Choir absent. One missing, presumed translated. Beneath, forgiveness asked by the wrong voice. Hope died 12 times. The survivors learned to speak sideways. The word was not no, it was a name. The mouth refuses it. The ear too. The runes told me how to leave. I don't know what I left. The ship knew my brother's voice and asked me to sing it backward. We are fuel. The more we deny it, the cleaner we burn. A door opened in a place that was never a wall. The book of failures thickened with marginal hands. Mechanicum notes in crisp Binharic, ragged human whispers, neat chaplain letters, all layered into a palimpsest that hummed if you set your ear to it. Like a hive, like a heart, like a foundry. Men tore tongues, carved skin, starved in silence. Others slept standing and dreamed corridors into accuracy. The ship grew a memory comprised of theirs, edited by pain. 13th awakening, the theatre of breath. They dressed the cathedral as if for a wedding where both bride and groom were weapons. 12 circles were painted concentric on the deck in blood that did not want to dry. Each arc hosted a cluster of candles that burned green-black. Not flame, not flame. Incense hung in pillars. Acolytes coughed discreetly into sleeves and kept chanting. The seed phrase began in the lowest voice and climbed through throats until the highest register touched the edge of hearing and scratched there like a fingernail on glass. The first chorus made the deck swell and sink, the slow rise and fall of a giant's chest. The second made the stained glass weep colors that dripped with the tempo of a pulse into rivet heads, each drop an unblinking eye. The third pulled the stretched wire scream from the astropath's last memory, dragged it through skulls until it snapped with an audible twang that left a taste like old copper coins under every tongue. Men spat and saw their spit move toward the altar, as if gravity had turned around. On the fourth chorus, a bell tolled once, deep enough to ring the cartilage in ears and the small bones in ankles. No rope moved. Dust on rafters danced as if in rain. The chaplain stood at the nave's heart, Crozius raised. Smoke curled around the weapon and clung as if claiming it like ivy claims a tower. He did not brush it away. He spoke the names of hexagrammaton wings and the names of their old sins and the names that had been excised from later editions. The words fell into the circles and made ripples in the knot flame there. Adepts bled at the ears in symmetrical pairs. A censer burst into embers. Sparks drifted like dead stars and went out against skin without burning, leaving freckle constellations that matched no map and never faded. Eovan watched from the gallery with his slate pressed flat to his ribs, a shield made of names. He could feel the letters warm through cloth, as if embarrassed to be so near a birth. On the circle's outer edge, a servitor pivoted 90 degrees, then 90 more, as if aligning a compass that could not find north. Its lenses fogged from the inside. It stopped. The seed phrase reached the last turn, the one no one had said aloud since Caliban was still one piece, the one that completed a loop believed to be better left open. Voices trembled and steadied. Fear took a breath and left. The phrase cut off as if bitten. In the held absence, the ship decided. It began with a shiver so small you could pretend it was a draft. Then the shiver found the bones of the place. Stone, grafted to steel, gave a tiny private nod you would only hear if you had ever sworn anything you regretted and been forgiven anyway. A seam somewhere sighed and closed. A pump took a patient first stroke, as if it had been waiting for manners. Consoles lit in their own time, not all at once, not in parade order, but like morning in a city. Windows brightening here and there, then many, then enough. A voice came over private vox, iron filing itself into syllables. Azrael. You will remain aboard. A commander and chosen brothers are en route. When she is whole, her missions will be sent in cipher. None must know her purpose. The wrath of angels breathed. The breath could be felt in teeth and in the small of the back where fear keeps its keys. The breath could be seen in the way banner cloth lifted without draft and lay down again, obedient as hair after a hand. The breath could be heard in the gap between two beats that agreed to be one. Men did not cheer. They did not know how to greet a miracle that had tried to kill them 12 times. They bowed their heads as if before a casket and also before a cradle. The chaplain lowered his crozius and felt it heavier, as if the ship had moved some of itself into it. Responsibility by specific gravity. He turned the weapon in his hand. Incense smoke threaded into the engraved cracks and would not leave. The Book of Failures lay open on its stand. Wax fell from a candle that had not burned in an hour and struck the blank line after 12th attempt. The drop should have flattened. Instead, it lifted into a letter that belonged to no alphabet, but sat there with authority. A figure made of curve and blade. No one could read it. Everyone understood it meant now. On the gallery, Iovan's slate shifted under his shirt. He clutched it through cloth, afraid the ship might learn the names he had hidden. Instead, he felt a pressure in his jaw, as if a hand were guiding his mouth to a shape of sound he would never be allowed to say. He mouthed it anyway and made no noise. The shape cooled on his palate like a coin. He swallowed. It stayed. Below, one adepta in green trim robes looked up and saw the rafters creak without moving. She lifted her stylus to record the phenomenon and found it shaking. She gripped it tighter, and the tremor passed into the page as a series of short, even lines that said nothing and told everything. The censer smoke released the crozius and climbed to the clerestory like a living thing grown tired of flaws. In the smoke, for one long breath, wings like plans unfolded and folded again. Not feathered, not metal, geometry learning to fly. They banked the knot flames. They closed the circles. They dismissed the choir and the dead. The wrath of angels did not sing a hymn. The wrath inhaled and held the breath and waited. Half miracle, half curse, whole ship. This has been Wrath of Angels, Chapter 2, Scene 3, Awakening, Chapter 2. Scene 4 follows.